Hello and welcome to Akademii Seniora. My name is Erin Dąbska. I'm the president of the Foundation of Television Puls, Dębem. And we are here at the 9th Congress of Nutrition at the University of Warsaw of Life Science. And I am here, and I would like to introduce to everybody today Professor Tommy Cederholm. He's from the University of Uppsala, Sweden. Welcome. Thank you for being here. We were talking earlier to your colleague about muscle loss. And I know as a woman after 50 that how important it is for keeping our muscle and our muscle mass. But why is it so important for us to keep that muscle mass when we're aging, when the process of aging starts happening?
Well, when we age, we start from the age of 30 to lose muscle, and it's a very slow process, continuous slow process. And since it's that slow, we kind of get used to perhaps not move as fast as usual. But in the end, you will lose your capacity to walk fast. You will lose your capacity to stand up from sitting. You will lose the capacity to carry your bags from the grocery store. So that's the reason why we need to be conscious about this somewhat hidden problem at older age. And of course, the reason why we lose muscle, there are many of them. And well, of course, one is that appetite is lost and we eat less. We also have perhaps some chronic diseases that will start metabolic actions in your body that kind of also break down your muscles. And aging itself is a what we call catabolic degrading process.
And after 50, it increases.
Absolutely.
Much more rapid.
It goes faster. Yeah. So slow gradual loss from 30, but after 50 and after 70, it goes really fast. So it's, and if you're not aware of it, you will definitely have problems with your everyday life.
Okay. And does muscle mass have an effect on our metabolism?
Absolutely. The muscle is extremely important for glucose metabolism together with the liver. It's probably the most important organ. So if you lose muscle and if you if you don't work with your muscle, your blood sugar will increase.
Diabetes becomes...
Diabetes is more common. Of course, it's also important for energy metabolism because muscle cells use a lot of energy. So if you have a high weight due to a lot of muscle, you consume more energy. But if you have small muscles but more fat, you cannot eat as much because you don't use the energy that you eat. So it's important.
So also by building muscle can affect our appetite, which would be a good thing for our elderly because they seem to not want to eat so much after a certain age.
That's a way to increase your appetite. It definitely is.
Okay. What would you advise in terms of foods to build our muscles?
Well, that's of course a big question, but it's important to not focus too much on single food items because we need to, this is something that we have to, that we eat every day, and then we need to combine what we call food patterns. So we need to have healthy food patterns, and that is important, that a healthy food pattern for your muscle is about the same healthy food pattern that you should eat for your heart, for your brain, for avoiding cancer. And that is perhaps a little bit unexpected because we have seen data that a plant-based diet with a lot of vegetable proteins is probably better for your muscle than to eat a lot of meat. Of course, meat is okay. The difference when we compare what you eat for your heart or for your brain is that you need to be a little bit more cautious about the protein intake when you think about your muscles. But in general, we cannot eat something for your heart, for the heart, eat something else for your
Right.
brain. We need to combine it. And fortunately, the same food patterns are good for all our organs in the body. Previously, we were quite focused on protein, and we still see a lot of young people eating a lot of proteins, meat, eggs, and everything. But perhaps if you're in kind of elite muscle builder, perhaps it could make a difference. But for general people, you should not overdo that kind of intake.
And what would you recommend on a daily basis? How many? I know it has to do with our body, our BMI, our index, our body mass index, and there's a calculation to that. But just kind of for your average elderly person, how many grams of protein should they intake daily?
Now, that is a little bit abstract, of course, but we say the general recommendation has increased over the last 10 years. So we say 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram body weight.
Okay.
So if you weigh like 60, if you're a woman, then you probably need about 65, 70 grams. Of course,
Seems like a lot of protein.
well, in the long run, in the end of the day, it is not that much protein. But of course, you need to be a little bit aware that perhaps for breakfast that you have some kind of dairy, could be fermented yogurt or something. You can have an egg, perhaps. You can have cheese or ham. And you think for your main meals that you go for the vegetable proteins, which means that you always need to have a little bit of perhaps beans and lentils on your plate. For snacks, nuts, for example, is good food.
So as we age, do you think that protein intake should be less, or should it even be more?
It should be more.
More.
Yeah, we need more protein because the body is not using the protein as efficiently as it does when you're,
Okay,
when
yes.
you're younger.
Just like we talked about with the muscle loss.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
That's right. So you need a little bit, relatively a little bit higher. For most people, it is really not a problem, but if you are 70, 80 plus and you're losing muscle, becoming sarcopenic, you need to have a higher intake of protein. And of course, when you get to if you're a nursing home resident, perhaps it's good for you to have an extra shot
Shake.
of protein.
Okay. And for example, like a shake, that would be a sufficient added protein, or would you?
Yes, of course, that is one way.
Not
if you do
recommend
it
that.
in your own kitchen or in the nursing home kitchen. But, well, unfortunately, you cannot really compete with the commercial products,
Right.
the protein-rich products.
The quality.
The quality
Right.
and the density and everything. So, but
And getting the right amino acids to
Absolutely, that's correct.
absorb the,
Yeah, yeah,
the protein. Okay, well, maybe for our last question, what would you advise, and what would be your top pick of foods, maybe even just nutrients, that you would recommend for your average elderly person? If you could say, these are what you should try to take or eat every day, what they could be supplements or vitamins.
But I think for the general older individual that tends to lose weight, have a little bit difficulties to get up from sitting, I would advise them to not change their food habits too much, especially if they have a good food habit, because coming back to that, what you eat for health in general is also good for your muscles. But you need to be a little bit more focused, perhaps learn a little bit about where are protein in your general food. And I think it's for many, we know that dairy products have quite a lot of proteins. Eggs are good. Of course, one neglected food item with a lot of good nutrients is seafood. Fish, fat fish is excellent. Perhaps poultry, chicken is as good as a protein source than beef. But of course, if you like beef, it's okay to have
do.
beef. Yeah, of course. So You definitely do. But I think you should pick protein-rich food items that you like.
Okay.
And perhaps that means that you need to know a little bit more about the protein,
Yes.
the protein content.
Okay.
And of course, that is not for everyone, but if you're interested. Otherwise, you would perhaps have an opportunity to talk to a nutritionist or to a dietitian that are the one that can really guide you.
Well, thank you. And good advice. So I think we all need to advocate for ourselves. We all need to maybe start learning and reading and maybe talking to more nutritionists, doctors, about exactly what Professor has told us, that we need our protein and we need to understand how much of that we need and what we should eat as we age to live a long, healthy life. Thank you.